3, 2, 1. Yeah, baby, let's do it. Welcome to Elk Radio. My name's Ian Kebblewhite. This is Elk Radio, Show 3, Segment 1. Yesterday evening, I pushed out a Coach by Elk communication, the topic being the importance of estate planning, and in particular, the importance of having a will. And I was just thinking about that after, and I thought, isn't it interesting that there really is only one certainty, and that's death. And I suppose I got to that because just in the evening, one of my oldest mates, one of my best mates, right back from school and through football, the real football that is soccer, he reached out to me in a message, and we're in regular contact. But it's been a little while since we've actually had a proper communication. And just in my reply, without really thinking, I said, hey, Gaza, mate, let's make sure that it's not too long before, and then I proceeded to say, before I'm 45, and then that struck me that before I'm even 50. And I thought, wow, it really did hit home. Now, I'm born in 1980, so I'm 40. And with that, I'm still a decade away, but it's really powerful when you actually think about, well, how old you really are and what does it actually mean. Because my next major milestone, my next celebration will be a 5-0, hopefully, and it certainly will be. But 50, the big 5-0. But look, let's not get ahead of myself. Well, let me not get ahead of myself. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. I'm still only 40, and 50, look, I'm still going to think the same and still going to be healthy and have so much health in front of me. But what it did make me think is, what can I hang my hat on? And just before I go down that pathway and get to that, look, Gaza, I'm going to do a shout out to Gaza because Gaza's an Elk member, and as I said, one of my closest mates. He's also one of the best real estate agents in Sydney. And I remember a time when he was walking around, was in the Sydney boom, and getting photos taken of him. And it just seemed that everything he was doing, just walking around putting sold stickers on everything. I said, Gaza, mate, what do you do all day? Just walk around putting sold stickers on things. That's what it looked like. And certainly Sydney has gone through, in the last period, some massive boom times, and it's going to have some indifferent and perhaps negative times ahead. And that's in relation to the values of those assets, with migration figures dropping. And those migration figures have really dropped. And that's an important stimulus and driver to the New South Wales, in particular Sydney, property price point or values, the underlying values. And as I've said before, I really do think that those values are going to come back, and they need to. There needs to be a correction to get it more realistic in terms of affordability for the long term. Now, I've commented previously that we as people really can't continue to chase this endless growth with these finite resources we have in our planet without expecting there's going to be some serious ramifications. And in our next show, I'm going to talk about Elk's philosophy, our investment philosophy when it comes to both impact investing, and that comes back to and stems from what Elk is about, and impact investing and taking in considerations such as environmental, social and governance, sustainable investing. But we're always chasing and we're always working towards making sure we don't leave any money on the table, that we get the best we can for our clients. But you've got to look at the factors that make the impact of what's being done sustainable and beneficial to the environment, to social, to people, to humans, and have governance in place to ensure that. So, look, we'll talk about that in the next radio show, but what I got to in terms of my realization, my stark realization about, wow, I'm getting older. And I'm sure some of you that are older than me, and there's a number of our members that are in that age profile, go, you know what, it's the best years of our life, and I'm sure it is. But with that, the point of my reflection was, what have I got to hang my hat on? And we'll talk about that because one of the other things that it made me think is to go harder, to make me to want to go harder, to have something to show for it. And there's probably two schools of thought here. There's when someone has a realization, and just think about it for a sec. How old are you? And in this next decade, how old will you be, and what's your next milestone? And what do you have to hang your hat on? And that means, what do you have to show for it? Or how have you lived that? That's probably where the two different schools of thought are. And for me, it's very much just who I am. It's inbuilt that I'm just this really ultra competitive person. And it's not about being competitive against other people. It's competitive against myself. I'm my biggest critic, and I just set goals and I want to go about achieving those because I've done that my entire life. I, for example, lived in St. Clair, and you might hear me drop the F-bomb or something like that every now and then. Now, St. Clair is just, I wouldn't change my upbringing. It was superb. The best family, siblings, best mates. In actual fact, in Facebook just the other day, I got a notification. I'm not on Facebook in a big way at all. I use it to keep people updated and the kids, and I like to stay connected with mates or friends or see things come up. But it's not a big part of who I am or what I'm about. But I did see a notification come through, and it said class of 91. And on that, there was a jumper. It's just amazing that that was so long ago, but that was my year 6 class. And with that was Claregate Public School. And I just remembered all the names. I just saw all those names, and I couldn't believe that all of them, I could remember those people. And remember little things about them, which, like one guy named Raymond, he loved Atari, he played computer games all the time. Just little things like that just instantly come to mind. And that's where, and where I'm going in relation to that is that, as I said, I'm that competitive person, that driven person. And for me, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but I used to live at St. Clair, St. Clair and Erskine Park. And at that point in time, I got selected to be one of a very select few, like a 1%er, that means, in terms of being able to get a scholarship for the Westfield Sports High Soccer and Elite Soccer program, where the likes of Harry Kuehl, I got to play with Harry. We won the 2v2 competition, in actual fact, at Westfields, and won it also at the New South Wales Academy of Sport, where others like Jason Kalina, Michael Beecham, a handful of Socceroos. Seriously, the biggest collection of Socceroos from any school come from there. So when you're put in that environment every day and you're coming up against the best, what it does is it pushes you. It makes you want to be the best. And it makes you do things and become someone that you probably didn't think you could. And as I said, with Elk, our why is to try and add value. And one way I think we can add value is certainly using all our expertise and all the things that drive us to help see, is there something that you can take from this to make yourself better or make your financial position better? And for me, that ultra competitiveness, that real appetite for success, and to just be the best I could be, so to work harder, to work my ass off, to have something to show for it, is probably where I'm leaning. That's the way I go. Just who I am, it's inbuilt. Versus living more, and so as a result of that, wanting to live more for it. And I certainly look to live more for it, but I just can't help wanting to just work and go hard non-stop. But I tell you what, I do love to turn off. I do love time for family, but I certainly can't just sit there. I can't just relax and just go to the beach. For me, even if I'm doing that, I'm thinking business. What can I do? How can I make this better? How can I drive this forward? How can I help people? How can I change things? For me, we really want to change things. We want to be financial reimagined. We want to be property reimagined. And we want to have something to show for it. We want Elk to stand for that. So that stems from, because what I'd do is, I'd live at St. Clair Erskine Park, and I'd get up at, say, 5:15, 5:30 every morning. And I was only 14, 15 then. That's pretty early to get up. And I know Olympic athletes, swimmers, they'd be getting up at that time or even a bit earlier to swim every day. So it's in that same kettle of fish. I'd get up, and Gazza's one of these guys. So Gazza's gone through that same environment. That person, Gazza, that I spoke about, one of the best real estate agents in Sydney, that's why he's so good, because he went through this environment where like for like people pushing each other, like our Elk members, or wanting to be better, to come together in a collective to get the best, well, that's going to make you better. And that's what our why is for Elk. So I'd get up at St. Clair Erskine Park and I'd take the bus. I'd get there for 6:15. So I'd walk down, and it can get cold in Sydney. It can get real damn cold in Western Sydney, absolutely. And then from there I get the bus. Now, I'm not sure if you guys know the geographics of Sydney, but I had two options. I get the bus on one side, the road to St Mary's Station, or the bus on the other side to Mount Druitt. Now, in that time, St Clair was one of the growth corridors. And that growth corridor was young families, beautiful families of all different types of origin. And that's why that class of 91, when I looked at those names, and I remember particularly because I had the longest surname along with one other, 11 I think it was, 11 letters in my surname, I should know that. And from there, saw that jumper and all those names came flashing back. So that was when I went to school at St Clair, and then I went to school at Westfields for high school. So St Clair, great location, and we just happened to be a stone's throw away from Mount Druitt. So you know what, I grew up to be streetwise because I was living in a situation where I had to pass through, as part of what I had to do, these next few suburbs. So I catch a bus to Mount Druitt Station. That was my preference because it was a bit closer in the direction I was going. Now Mount Druitt, look it up. It's an interesting place. And then from there, I go through to Blacktown, and then it'd be all stops to Blacktown. So Rudy Hill, Doonside, Blacktown. I still remember the recording coming over the train from the conductor, the auto conductor. And then from there, it'd go only a couple of stops, Parramatta, and then Granville, another interesting place. Now I'm Australian, and so I've gone through those different locations, and with that, what I mean by the fact I'm Australian is that we're all Australian in all regards if we live here, and especially if we adopt our culture and lifestyle. And in that though, I had to become accustomed to the different and respect the different origins and the different cultures I was passing through that located themselves in that location. And my best mates, all my best mates are through that area. And I got to learn so much because they'd all come. I'd have mates join me at different stops along the way, ultimately to take us to Fairfield. So we get off at Granville and change lines and then catch it all stops to Fairfield. So it was a bit rough and tumble, so much so that actually it was not abnormal to carry a shopping trolley bar in your school bag just to make sure that you were protected. Now, one of the things that I've done through my life, it was also since I was a kid, my dad got me to actually go, and it was at Mount Druitt, actually just next door to that. The Minchinbury, that's it. There was a dojo there, karate. So I was able to practice and learn karate since I was a young boy. So that's where the discipline, I think, that discipline and commitment to wanting to drive and be the best I can comes from. So I was able to have confidence and know that I could handle myself in that situation because I went from white belt and all the way through to black belt first dan over about 10 years. So I've always burnt the candle at both ends. School over a distance to get to an ultimate destination where I was able to learn a lot, and that stood me in good stead to go through all those different environments on the way to landing in Fairfield, then catching a bus from Fairfield to Westfields. And that was a school that then pushed you and drove you against the best in Sydney. All these people come from different locations to come and train. So that's why my driver is to hang my hat on it. So what can I hang my hat on? I want to have something to show for it. And others is what can they show in terms of how they've lived it. And I certainly look for that, but I'm naturally leaning towards the, what can I show for it? And that then makes me think, well, is it a matter of nature or nurture? And I know there's some on Netflix, some programs, and even about Michael Jordan and through coaching in football, soccer, there's an argument. Is it the nature? So is it just that someone like Harry Kewell is so damn good, so talented, and in Australia he was a head and a bit of a shoulder in front of the next best players, and the next best players are superstars. So there has to be some nature to it. But I think it's certainly a matter of nature and nurture. And so whilst your natural instinct may not be to drive and have those skills and abilities to be a finance expert, or even just to know what's going on in finance, The nurturing is where, through Elk, our Coach by Elk, and through what we're doing with our Elk app, is the nurture to help you make the right decisions or know what you need to do. And now with that, the financial education in Australia is just rat shit, isn't it? Seriously, there's nothing in schools to prepare you for this. And so people pop out of school and university and go, well, what do I do? And they go to the banks. You don't deal with the banks directly. So Elk isn't a bank. Well, what a bank should be. And what we're doing here is we're building a new way, a different way. We're financially reimagined about how we can help people with their full universe of needs. So universal advice, where you can come to us, and because of all our skills and experience, our expertise, our licenses, we can start at a starting point of talking, then getting to know you, and then drilling down through our Elk expense economics. And then just on that, you need to complete our Elk expense economics, please. It's so valuable. But then the next step is look at your bank statements. Just last night, I did that for someone else I know. And looking at it, and it's just amazing where money is taken from. Just direct debits, all the things you don't think about or you don't give the attention it needs can add up. And you could fill in our Elk expense economics sheet, and that's why that's step one. But that's why we then ask for bank statements after, obviously, you've gone through and we've given proof of delivery and credibility, where those bank statements go, okay, wait a second, this is what you think you're spending in your expense economics, and you've probably looked at it in terms of your bank statements to put that together. But then let's look at the bank statements, look at where that money is being spent, and there's always money that can be saved. There's always money that can be saved. People spend all that they earn. That's one of the main issues facing households in Australia. So with that, the point of starting with Elk expense economics is to get to know you, and then that allows us to start to see what can you hang your hats on. So what can you hang your hats on? Now, for people at the moment and just historically, and it's just a general comment that they just chase returns. Now, in times like this, it just shows you that chasing returns is your only driver. Chasing interest rates is your only driver. It's going to leave you with deficiencies in what you're trying to achieve. So people come out with little to no financial education. They don't know where to turn, and they go to the banks. And then from that, they read and go, oh, look, I need the property that's going to give me the best growth, and I need a super funds give me the best growth. But there's so much more to it than that. It's not just about the return, because in times like this, when the markets drop, the shit hits the fan, then you see that strategy doesn't really work, does it? That chasing returns is it's a finite game. It's not the infinite game to get you to where you need to be. You need to play a long-term, infinite game in your situation that's going to be ongoing for the rest of your life. And if you're chasing returns, then you've got little to no control. What our strategy is about, and what you should be looking at as part of financial education, and this is the financial education we're going to provide you. I'm going to continue to provide you on our Elk Radio shows, through our Elk app, and then through one-to-one type communication when you reach out to us, or we'll reach out to you and say, look, what can we do to help? How can we help? How can we add value? Is to start to go, well, the strategy should be not to chase returns. And that's nearly what nearly all financial advisors talk about, because that's their only value proposition, isn't it? Most of them it is. There's superannuation. Superannuation is a scheme, and superannuation, it's a good scheme. It's a tax-friendly environment to encourage people to save for their retirement. But it's not going to give you what you need in nearly all respects, in nearly all circumstances for most people. It's going to give you a lump of funds, but you can't hang your hat on that. You're going to need to do other things. And if you've just got super and you're just chasing return, and you're chasing return right up to the age where you're 60, 65, what happens when that return shits itself and that market drops? You work for longer. So how do you fix that? Well, you stop chasing returns and you be more sensible about it. Because we've always had a slow and steady wins the race. We're not going to leave any money on the table. Let me tell you, we're not going to be lazy, because that's not in us. I think I've shown that. I was the silly prick that got up, and it changed my life, though. It made me who I am today. So I love the fact that I'd travel an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes one way, an hour to 45 minutes back each day, just to go to school, to be in that environment, to be the best I can be. So I'm not in it to have us, Elk, or our members leave any money on the table. But we're sensible. We put in place long-term structures with traditional index assets that allow them, that are based on allowing them to do their thing over time, not chasing returns, not just return-based. Return's an important factor, as is lower interest rates and saving to get the best return on investment possible in a real-world, long-term, infinite game, sensible approach. And the way to do that is with the right strategy. And guys, it's simple. You just need more assets. You need to grow your asset pool. So when the market shits itself on that thing you've got working for you that you're chasing a return on, you go, well, you know what? That's okay, because I've got other assets. I've got enough assets in the pool that I can not be impacted by that. But to do that, you've got to have a plan. You've got to actually choose to execute that plan. You can't sit there not taking action. You can't sit there thinking, oh yeah, look, it'll do it for me. The super will do it for me because it's getting 10% returns. Let me tell you, our Elk Invest portfolio has been kicking ass over the last few years, getting double digits, 18 up to 20% returns in the period pre-COVID. And in that COVID period, what happened is the markets dropped, but due to the way in which we'd structured that portfolio, all that happened is it simply wiped out the returns, not the capital. Our client's capital is still there. There's no loss of capital. So it wiped out return to a certain period, and now that market's continued again. Continue to go forward in that up and down bounce. But we're not just chasing returns. That portfolio is part of a bigger strategy. And that strategy is grow your asset pool using a barbell portfolio. Imagine you're watching the Olympics that have been deferred, unfortunately, and then when it comes on, how good's that going to be? I love the Olympics, but it is number 2 in the size of sports events in the world. The World Cup, soccer, football, that's the biggest sporting event in the world. Don't let them tell you otherwise. It's the biggest because soccer is a world game. Now, enough on that. Sorry, I might lose some members because rugby league's a great sport. In actual fact, rugby union, rugby league, AFL, they're all great sports. I love watching them. My little Phoenix, he's a beef. He's a beefcake. I was going to say he's a beast. He's a beast. And he's just so fast and so strong. And my brother Ryan, mate, he's a Broncos fanatic. And he's already going lined up for Broncos. I said, mate, look, I prefer at least if he's going to do that, he's got to be number 6. He's got to be the playmaker. Or he's got to be rugby union, fly half because of all the kicking and running that goes on. But you never know. He might be a soccer player if I can influence that nurture enough. Now, don't use your hands, Phoenix. Use your feet, buddy. That's the nurture. So with that, what I'm saying is that in relation to our portfolio, that strategy we've got, that barbell portfolio, and what it looks like, we're at the Olympics and we're watching this Turkish weightlifter, and Turkish, some of the best weightlifters in the world, and some of my best mates from Sydney, that Westfields, those train station trips are Turkish. I love them. Now, with that, and some of the best soccer players I've come up against. So with that, what that Turkish weightlifter, and he's got short arms because he's a weightlifter, and he's there he's about to lift that bar. And on the left-hand side of the bar is the biggest weights. Large, low-cost core holdings, we'll call them. Those 200 kg weights, big ass weights. And you need 3 or 4 of those. And your plan might be different, but you've got to have enough of those large, low-cost core holdings, enough of those assets on the bar, enough of those weights on the bar. In this instance, they are assets. They are all there, each weight to do a job as part of your overall strategy, as part of your overall portfolio, which is about you growing your asset pool, not chasing returns. And on the right-hand side, you've got the usual suspects, because you need liquidity. You need super in its liquid form, so you need a collection of Australian shares, international shares, fixed interest, listed property, cash. And we're going to grow that side of the bar out. We want to get to the point where ultimately the assets on the left-hand side of the bar are about 50%, and the assets on the right side of the bar are about 50% of the total weights on the bar. Now that's going to give you enough assets to mean that if the return 0%, 10%, 20%, you don't care, as long as money's not being left on the table, as long as it's sensible, as long as it matches your risk profile, and that gives you the assets to get to where you need to be future-proof, having the money you need when you need it. Now, with that, I love to say I was listening to a rival radio station. Well, Elk Radio is not a rival to this commercial station. I was listening to a commercial station, and if you need the proof, just think of anyone in the last 20 years, last 10 years. And I learned this lesson as a kid when my uncle Dazza said to me, he goes, mate, if I bought that property, if only I bought that block of land, I think it was Kenthurst, all those years ago, God, it would be worth so much now. And in certain respects, he probably would have been able to do it, I imagine. I didn't ask that, but I imagine if he was looking at it, he probably would have been able to do it, just chose not to. And that is a situation that a lot of people find themselves in. But they can do something. They know they can. It's obvious they can, but they choose not to. And then 10 years goes by and 20 years goes by. Oh, if only I bought that property when it was cheap. For goodness sake, take the action you need to take to not be in a situation where you look back and go, oh shit, look what it's worth now. Now, I'm not purporting that property value is going to double in value every 10 years. That game is over. Now, with that though, traditional long-term assets like property will continue to grow over time. And you'll access open market forces. And they'll go through their cycles. But holding a property for 10 years plus, and I think it's about 20 odd years, that gives you the ultimate number. And I know it's about 20 to 23 years. And RP Data Core Logic, one of the biggest research houses and data firms in Australia about property, which has been recording property sales for the last 100 years, says that anywhere up to 10 years, it's a pain or gain, depending on when you sell and what the market conditions are. But after 10 to 12 years, it starts to turn into a gain, certainly. And then it's a real gain in that period, plus. And then at 23 years, that's where you start to see that ultimate return being crystallized. And this commercial radio station was talking about one of the guys that was a real figure on TV with those game shows. And he was doing pretty well. And he just bought up a whole lot of property when it was cheap. But it wasn't cheap then, it was just what it was worth then. But they're using language when it was cheap. And I wish I did that. Well, you can do that if you look at your situation, do a stock take, work out what suits you, work out what fits your affordability, what fits your comfort, and then take some action by going about putting a strategy to build a portfolio to grow your asset pool, so you're not at risk when the next crisis occurs or when markets do their thing, which is up and down, which affects your return. Grow your asset pool to protect yourself, to future-proof yourself. We'd love to help. Thank you for listening, guys. I've really enjoyed this one. I look forward to Elk Radio Show 4, where we start to talk about impact investing, our philosophies, and what that means. Elk Money Supply and Exchange, and how that social aspect of trying to eliminate credit card debt through our EMSC, our MZ, Elk Money Supply and Exchange, can change Australia, can change the world, and what we're doing there to innovate. So look forward to that, guys. Thank you very much. Cheers.